This past winter and spring has been quite demoralizing. It seems that we've had about 7 months of cold, wet, and windy weather without a real break. Spring usually starts earlier here in Ireland, or at least earlier than where I grew up in Canada. But this season seems to be at least 1.5 months late, if not more, and I've lost the head start that I normally enjoy with this more temperate climate. The flowering of all the fruit trees and wild plants seems to have been delayed, and the weed seeds are only just starting to sprout. It all feels quite late. But it's hard to say for sure because I haven't made note of these seasonal markers in the past. Has it really been that cold and delayed, or is it just normal variation of spring weather? Looking over all the data from the National Weather Service, it's been cold but not record breaking. The average or mean temperature has been lower than normal for most of February and March, with a few periods which were much colder than usual. We even had some snow sticking on the ground for a few days in March, which is really rare for this maritime climate in Ireland. The mean daily temperature for April was apparently higher than normal, but it certainly didn't feel that way. It seems that the nighttime temperatures were unusually warm for a good part of the month. And so far, May has been quite unsettled, feeling quite cool and windy, but with a few really nice warm days mixed in. It's been quite windy, and although plants probably don't feel the wind chill the same way that we do, the wind can certainly blow away any warmth that does build up close to the ground whenever the sun is shining. And of course, this being Ireland, there's been a fairly consistent amount of rain. So for most of the spring, it's been either cold, overcast, wet, or windy, and often all at the same time. A delayed start to the growing season can be a bit of a problem here in Ireland because we rely on a longer growing season to make up for our relatively cool summers. I also misjudged things a bit because I didn't prepare as many beds as I could have in the autumn, and with the wet spring I really didn't feel that I could dig earlier, and now that things have warmed up and the soil has dried out, there's suddenly a lot of extra work to do. Because of all of this, I ended up not sowing some of the fast growing early crops that I was trying to squeeze in before the main growing season. And I've also delayed sowing some of the other crops, the result of which will likely be a reduced yield, but that depends on how good of a growing season we have for the rest of the year. I had trouble with some of the earlier sowings that I did make, as the weather always seemed to turn cold and windy whenever these plants needed to be transplanted into the gardens. And as a result, a lot of them were set back and are still struggling, although hopefully things will improve now that the weather is getting a lot better. This means that the hunger gap is going to be longer than usual, with all of the crops that I stored from last year pretty much gone, and it's still going to be a while before anything can be harvested from the gardens outside. I'm just really glad that I have a polytunnel to grow in, and the early spring crops that I sowed under the cover of plastic have done exceptionally well this season. So what do I do if I'm to assume that we might get similar growing conditions next season, with soil that's too wet to dig, too cold for any decent germination, and very slow growth of plants? One option is to simply not sow any early crops or crops that need a warmer spring, to be patient and to wait until I'm sure that things have warmed up enough. Another option is to prepare as many of the beds as possible in the autumn and to find a way to cover the soil over the winter so that they're ready to go as soon as they're needed, reducing possible delays and the amount of work in the spring. Overwintering cover crops or green manures could be a good option here, but it would be best if the plants could be pulled out entirely in the spring, because if they had to be dug in, then this may cause additional problems and could delay things even further. Another option would be to cover the prepared soil with landscape fabric or tarps, and this could be a really good possibility, assuming that I could prevent them from blowing away in the winter storms. Or I could simply do the work to prepare the beds whenever they're needed, regardless of how wet the soil is, and accept the fact that there may be some damage to the soil structure. To not be so precious with it, but I'm really not keen on doing that. And of course, using no-dig methods, especially mulching with a thick layer of finished compost, has distinct advantages in this context. But even if I sorted out the soil preparation issues, it would still be too cold for most plants to grow. I could sow and transplant anyways and accept that there will be a certain amount of crop losses, but this could be a big waste of effort. Otherwise, I need to find a way of creating a warmer microclimate for the plants. Covering the crops with a fleece or crop cover can be a good way of doing this, as it will help to raise the temperature by a few degrees, which can make a big difference, as well as reducing the damaging effect of winds. Perhaps the best option is to stretch a sheet of plastic over a series of hoops down the length of the bed, creating a temporary polytunnel, only at a much smaller scale. The space underneath this plastic can be an ideal growing environment for many crops in the spring, but it can also get too hot when the sun does shine, so it needs to be actively managed. Of course, all of this means more work, more costs, and more plastic and other materials in the garden, all of which can be damaged or blown away with the high winds that we can get. But this can be balanced by the possibility of harvesting more crops and having a better growing season. The main thing I'm realizing yet again is that the weather is so unpredictable and it seems to be getting worse. But as a grower, I need to adapt and to be more resilient and to be able to produce good food no matter what crazy weather this changing climate throws at my gardens. Who knows what this summer is going to bring? For now, I'm enjoying the good weather that we are getting and working hard to get the gardens back on track. Looking at the long-range weather forecast, it seems that we might get a long stretch of good, fine weather, and I'm looking forward to that. It's been a month since I uploaded my previous video, and it's taken me way too long to finish this one. But it's been an extraordinarily busy May in the gardens. I hope to get back on track fairly soon and release videos more frequently. I'm aiming for at least 3 a month, if not 1 a week. If you like my videos, if you like the work that I'm doing, be sure to subscribe. And if you want to support me even more, please check out my Patreon page linked here or in the description below. But as always, thanks for watching.